Today's shir is sponsored by Shirley, Zuck, and family to commemorate the yahrzeit of Shirley's mother, Rachel Zoberman, Rachel Golda Bat Avraham Chaim. So we thank Shirley, Zuck, and family for the sponsorship. May the neshama have an aliyah from our gathering here tonight and from our words of Torah. The name of the parsha is Vayakhel. Vayakhel. Kahal, gathering. Now, gathering is a very significant word that relates to us, the Jewish people, but it actually relates to our relationship to humanity. And if you remember what we read, the Megillah, the scroll that we read on Sukkos is called Koheles. Same word, kahal lit kahel, a gathering together. And the commentators explain that these words of Koheles, the words of Shlomo HaMelech, were read during Sukkot, and the audience was not just the people of Israel. Actually, the audience was humanity. Sukkot was a time that there was an expectation that all members of the human race tried to make their way to Jerusalem, because after all, it's a holiday of appreciation, and appreciation is not just for the Jews. There's an expectation that a good human being appreciates what is given to him, is appreciative to parents, appreciative to community, and yes, appreciative to the Creator for this magnificent world we live in. So kohelet is a very important word of gathering. And the truth is, if you think of an era where the masses did not have books, obviously they did not have the technology we have today to gather, the only way you could create a community was by gathering. And there's a concept of an international community, but we Jews know very well that we cannot achieve anything on the international stage if we don't get our act together. And this parsha of Vayakhel is really about getting the Jewish act together. We're concerned about humanity. When we read about a war in Europe, obviously it's extremely disturbing, not just for selfish reasons that the market is down, but rather it's a concern for the welfare of humanity. Yes, that's something very, very Jewish, to be concerned about the welfare of others. But we're not going to be a light upon the nations if we don't have electricity flowing through ourselves. So the Vayakhel of this week's parsha, and therefore it's a very important one, the gathering, the assembly, is an assembly for us to create our identity. Now, when we study Chumash, we focus mainly on the simple reading of the text. That is our approach. Obviously, you could hear lectures and you could read words of Torah that focus more on midrashim, and obviously they have significant, magnificent messages. But we try to focus on the simple understanding of the text. There are times that rabbinic statements in midrashim shed light and provide clarity. And therefore, I would like to start off with a midrash, a very important midrash, I believe, because it gives us an understanding of what exactly is this gathering all about. Now, we know the story. Moshe gathers the people of Israel. We expect him to start giving the details about the construction of the Mishkan, the tabernacle. Although many, many details, almost all of them, have been provided in the parshiot leading to last week's parsha, now we have Moshe given an opportunity to communicate all the information to the people of Israel. So we would expect that Vayakhel would start off with the construction of the Mishkan. However, Moshe felt that it is appropriate to start off with Shabbat. And therefore, the parsha starts off with the two verses about Shabbat. Sheshet yamim taseh melacha, work for 6 days. On the 7th day, it's a day not to do any melacha. And then verse 3, one specific prohibition among the many is spelled out here. Lo tivaru esh bechol moshvatechem, you shall not kindle fire in any of your dwellings b'yom HaShabbat, on the day of Shabbat. So this is an introduction, and we know that the rabbis tell us that although they are going to be building that home for the Creator, they should be sure not to be working 24 hours, 7 days a week, but rather rest on Shabbat. And once they were told about the Shabbat, the information regarding the construction can be spelled out. So this is what we are told. So Vayakhel is very, very important because it is that process of a rebuilding of the Jewish people. We sinned as a nation. We unfortunately stumbled with the creation of the golden calf. This is a rebuilding that is necessary. And comes the Midrash, and the Midrash tells us that you want to know why there was a Kahelet Moshe? Why was there a gathering around Moshe? So the Midrash tells us, Tavo Kohelet Moshe Rabenu. Let this gathering done by Moshe come, v'techaper, and it shall atone al Kohelet Aharon, and that should atone for the gathering that took place around Aharon. The construction of the golden calf took place due to a gathering and the pressuring of Aharon. That was a chet, that was a sin. There is a need for atonement. So therefore, the gathering here that starts off this process, and this week's parsha is a kahelet to atone for another gathering, the gathering of Aharon, the gathering that took place with the construction of the golden calf. Now, I'm going to take this midrash, and if this midrash is telling me that you are going to be reading now a portion that's all about atonement for the golden calf, I would like to, again, analyze and present a little bit of a different approach to what exactly was the big deal about the golden calf, right? What was the main issue? So we've heard about Avodah Zarah, we've heard about idolatry, we've heard about the Jewish people seeking a way of connecting to God with something tangible when they weren't commanded to do so. It's very, very tempting to look at tangible things, to worship God. If you have ever seen a documentary or a video or a movie about a Catholic church, and again, I'm not recommending it, but if you have ever seen, it's quite fascinating the amount of images they have and statues that they have. It's just unbelievable that it looks like a dollhouse when you look at pictures of some Catholic church in Mexico. And it is tempting in some ways that when you want to meditate about a higher being, you look at some fellow with hair and a nice beard, and you look at a bunch of statues of women holding a baby. There's something it's easier in some ways. The problem is it's avodah zarah. That's idolatry, because you are taking the holy and you're making it something tangible and quite limited. And for us, the Jewish people, that's not the way we worship. We are demanded to go ahead and find different tools to connect to our Creator. Study text, be inspired by nature, right? Those are ways we connect. Our ancestors failed. They needed something tangible. Remember, this is a primitive nation. It came out of Egypt with the incredible experience of the revelation was simply not enough to uproot all of their avodah zarah, and they failed. So that perhaps is the more traditional way of analyzing the sin. But I'm going to present you an insight that focuses on the word boshesh. Boshesh. If you remember, the sin of the golden calf starts off with Vaya'ar Ha'am. The nation saw that Boshesh Moshe, that Moshe Rabbeinu was delayed. He simply was not back yet. They had an expectation that he come at a specific time, that he return from being disconnected from the nation, from being on top of the mountain with the Creator. They expected him at a specific time, and Moshe Rabbeinu was Boshesh. And it's a unique word. It's a unique word. Because if they're trying to say that Moshe Rabbeinu was delayed, so they could have said, the Torah could have written that Moshe Rabbeinu was me'acher, right? He was me'acher. Why specifically the word boshesh? It means delayed, but why use that unique word? And obviously, if for such a significant section of Torah, a unique word is used, there's a message there. So listen to the following message from a rabbi, the author of Aktav VaKabbalah, passed away in 1865, Rabbi Yaakov Mecklenburg. And he says the following: there are two ways a person could be delayed. Two ways you could be delayed. One way of being delayed is that you go to an event, you go to a party, you go to a wedding, you expect it to come home at 9:30, but you realize that actually the food is very, very good. The company there is amazing. As you are participating in the simcha, you feel that you're making a contribution. You just feel good about the experience. So although you expected to be home at 9:30 p.m., you stayed an extra hour and a half, you get home at 11. So when you got home, you were me'acher, you came me'uchar, you came home late. Why? You were involved in something meaningful that you did not want to detach yourself from. That's a me'acher. Then there's such a thing called undesirable delay, a delay of burden. In other words, let's say you fly into Pearson, and as you arrive in your small flight from who knows where, two large flights just arrived, two Boeing 747s just arrived in the same terminal. And while you are hoping to get out of passport control and immigration and COVID test within 15 minutes, it took you 2 hours, because at the same time that your plane landed from Miami, two large planes arrived, one from Islamabad and one from New Delhi. And these are 800 people with lots of suitcases that simply just got off the plane, and you got delayed an extra hour and 45 minutes. The word you're going to use to describe your delay is not me'uchar, but rather boshesh. Why? The word boshesh is something that is perhaps like a busha. It's shameful. It's a delay you would prefer not to have. Okay, you hear the difference between le'acher and boshesh. And based on that, when we look at the people of Israel analyzing Moshe Rabbeinu's delay, they projected on it something very negative. In other words, they knew that Moshe Rabbeinu is spending time with the Creator, getting guidance how to live a Jewish life with rules and regulations. The more Moshe Rabbeinu receives, the more of a responsibility we have. So the people of Israel were saying to themselves, Genuk shein, enough. It's time for Moshe to come back. And therefore, the delay of Moshe in their eyes, and they projected it upon him, was not a delay of pleasure, but a delay of busha, of boshesh. And as a result, we can understand The root, the problem of the sin of the golden calf starts off with that one key word. Vayar ha'am, the nation saw, ki boshesh Moshe, that Moshe Rabbeinu was delayed not due to enjoyable activities, but due to something he would prefer not to have. Too many rules, too many regulations, a loaded and demanding Judaism. This was their attitude. And when you have such an attitude and things go wrong, well, you seek other venues for meaning. And that led to them gathering around Aharon, Vayakhel, that they gathered around Aharon. And what happens? Unfortunately, the downfall with the sin of the golden calf. Now that we have a little bit of an understanding, or perhaps another angle, how to look at the flaw, the sin that led to the golden calf, a problem of attitude, a problem that we view Judaism as one big burden, we could start focusing on the remedy. This is the portion of the remedy. Parashat Vayakhel is, as the Midrash tells us, Tavo Kohelet Moshe. The gathering that takes place around Moshe Rabbeinu is there to lechaper, to atone, al Kohelet Aharon, on the gathering that was taking place around Aharon. In what way does it atone? Number one, Shabbat. Shabbat is the way you atone. In other words, if I have a negative attitude towards Judaism, if I feel that it's something that just burdens me, the way to address it is with one thing, Oneg Shabbat. When Shabbat is meaningful, right? When it's a time that I gather with others, right? Difficulty during this period of time, obviously. But I gather and there are foods that I enjoy, and it's a time that I could disconnect from the world, right? We're going through a period of time, right? The news today, I think you all agree, is not pleasant news. It's concerning. It is concerning. It is concerning as a human being. It's concerning even for Israel because, it's, immediately every nation has to take a side, and Israel has to side with the West. And obviously you're going to have hear statements, negative statements from Putin and Russia. These are not enjoyable times. And sometimes the problem is that we get too much information, right? And we're looking at our phones and we're looking at the screen. We're Baruch Hashem, in 24 hours from now, we could disconnect. And for all of us here, I assume our disconnecting is not going to change the course of action. I don't think that in the audience here, we have those who are advising either the Ukrainian military or the Russian military. So we can disconnect and it will have no negative impact. It will only have a positive impact because we could sit down and we could sing Zmiris for Shabbos. We could study something. We could enjoy foods. We could remember that, you know what? In this ridiculous world we live in, we could disconnect and remind ourselves about who we are. Oneg Shabbat gives meaning. Shabbos gatherings give meaning when done correctly. And therefore, Vayakhel Moshe, he's gathering them. And this is a nation that needs, at this point, an understanding that Judaism should not be viewed as a burden. It's the most important thing when it comes to educating the next generation. And if we have a negative attitude towards things, obviously the kids are going to pick up. And I think I'm guilty of it sometimes. You know, there are things that during Pesach, believe it or not, we're already thinking a little bit about Pesach. And for me not to have my oatmeal in the morning is significant. And I don't have oatmeal Pesach. And I have to be mindful of the fact that I shouldn't kvetch too much. Because if I kvetch too much, God forbid, my kids are going to have an attitude that it's a burden. So obviously I'm a human being, and there's an understanding that, yes, it's a little bit of a challenge for me. But I hope at least that the overall attitude that I have toward Judaism is that this is a gift. You know, there are details that are difficult, but overall it gives me meaning. It gives me clarity. I understand what life is about. It gives me the tools of appreciating the world. Shabbat is really that key. And it's really our identity. You're a Shomer Shabbos Jew. It's your identity because it tells the person there's value. It's something you should appreciate. Value your tradition. Please don't view it as a burden. Please don't take the teachings as a busha, as a boshesh, but rather understand that it is a time to find that identity and find the meaning. Now, what commentators point out is that this beautiful idea of Shabbos gatherings, and when times were better before, 2 years ago, when we were able to all come to shul, and I think we all experienced nice things when we would gather with others, share a little bit about our life, be inspired a little bit, perhaps hear some kind of niggin in shul that will inspire us. Shabbos and Vayakhel, and we really, really pray that the day will come that we could gather together again. Although there's a lot of positive, there actually, believe it or not, could be a negative Vayakhel. There could be a negative Vayakhel. One of the commentators points out that there's another Vayakhel in the Torah, which has to do with Korach gathering people around him to be critical and rebel against Moshe. And therefore, although we talk about Shabbos and although we talk about gathering together as a wonderful thing, there's a little bit of a warning here by the same word being used in a negative context, Vayakhel of Korach, who symbolizes machloket, symbolizes strife, and symbolizes this inner fighting within the Jewish nation. There's a little bit of a warning here. That takes place. That the Torah is telling us, be careful that your Vayakhel doesn't turn into a fire. And based on that, I mentioned the third verse that appears in this week's Parsha. When we are told, listen, Moshe gathered everyone. Moshe Rabbeinu told them that Shabbos you rest and do not build the tabernacle. And then he tells them, Lo tiva'aru esh, you shall not kindle fire, bechol moshvotechem, in all of your dwellings, biyom HaShabbat. And commentators wonder why mention specifically the prohibition of creating fire when there are so many other things that could have been mentioned. So the most traditional and logical approach is what the Rashbam, a commentator that focuses on the simple reading of the text. And he tells us that you should know, since on Yom Tov it is permissible and indeed a mitzvah to work with fire because you're supposed to have fresh food on Yom Tov, since fire is part of a spiritual day for the people of Israel on Yom Tov, because you cook, therefore the Torah needs to spell out that Shabbos is different, that when it comes to Shabbos, lo teva'aru esh b'chol moshvotechem. That's what the Rashbam tells us. However, if you ever are looking for good drosha material in a parsha, and remember, a drosha that's given is focused more on the message, right? When you hear a rabbi giving a drosha, as I used to in the past, and perhaps one day will merit that we'll have that again. If you ever hear a drosha in shul, the rabbi is not always going to be presenting you with the most basic understanding of the text, because his goal is to get a message, share a practical message. Sometimes it's good, sometimes not. One of the texts you could turn to that will assist you in drosha creation is a commentator known as the Kli Yakar. The Kli Yakar is printed in the Mikraot Gedolot. And here he shares an insight into why specifically the Torah mentions the prohibition of fire, of kindling fire. And he tells us the following, that you should know, what the Torah is telling us here is Shabbos is a day that we're not busy. We're not busy. right? We put away our technology, Baruch Hashem, don't work. When you're not busy, you could do some incredible things. You could meditate, you could go ahead and develop yourself, develop an appreciation, reach out to people who need the attention. There's some good things we could do. But there's also a danger. You know what the danger is? That if, let's say, there's an issue in town, some kind of fight, Shabbos is a day that a small fight could turn into a gigantic fight because you're sitting in shul and you share that Lashon Hara with someone and they share it with someone else. And, you know, when there's information that in the beginning of davening, only one person perhaps knows about, by the end of Kiddush, the whole shul knows about. These things could happen. These things could happen. It's problematic. Says the Kli Yakar, when we are told that you gather together as Jews, when we are told that the day to gather together is Shabbos, there's a warning here, Lo tevaru esh, do not kindle a fire. Do you know what fire this is referring to? The fire of a machloket, of a fight, of a disagreement, right? A friction in a community. Those are terrible things. And Jewish heroes are people who are able to bite their tongue or bite their lip and keep quiet when there's something bothering them about someone else. The worst part is sometimes people believe that it's a religious obligation to go ahead and curse out someone. That's a major problem. And I know of a story that of a shul, a very well-respected rabbi in the United States, who some zealot decides that the rabbi did something wrong by inviting some speaker who was not Jewish. And today, these meshugana, these zealots that are so convinced that they're so religious, are going and using social media like Facebook and Twitter and whatever other tools they have, tools that could be used for the good. They're using those tools to try to destroy the life of a person, of a rabbi who's trying to do good for his community. Terrible. It's a terrible thing. Machloket is like a fire. It could burn down communities. It could destroy communities. We know it. We've seen stories. You read history books. It's not new, by the way. It's a problem that exists. And that's why he writes, that's why we have Lo tivaru esh, you gather Shabbos, be sure it's a meaningful gathering. Be sure it's a gathering that's positive. Be sure that you come in with the right attitude, because otherwise you could have a destructive esh hamachloket. Now, how exactly do you achieve it? This is a question that needs to be asked. I want to create a religious community. I want to be sure that people have an attitude that religion gives them meaning, and at the same time, it's a religion that doesn't become dry upon you. What do I mean by that? Just as if you have a forest where it hasn't rained for many, many months, and there's a small fire, the fire could catch and spread. And on the other hand, if it's a moist field, obviously the moisture is going to protect the fire and limit its spread. With people too, if a person has a positive attitude towards Judaism, towards life, and they hear some negative information, they don't have a need to spread it, right? Because if you feel this fulfillment for what you are doing, there's no need to put someone else down. I do believe that the biggest cause of such issues in a community is the byproduct of people not feeling good about what they are doing. A religious person and a decent person should really walk around feeling, I am doing some incredible things. If you are involved in any charity organization in town, if you perform any mitzvah, from davening, from the study of Torah, from keeping kosher, the real proper feeling should be, I'm doing some amazing things. Unfortunately, education has always emphasized in a very destructive way that people are more not mindful of the negative than the positive. In other words, when I do something wrong, I remember it much, much longer than when I do something good. And that is problematic for many, many reasons. What a Torah Jew should remember is that we actually have a formula that good deeds should carry 500 times more weight than negative deeds. It's really true. I can prove this. Because when the Torah talks about punishing someone that's evil, it could continue for 4 generations, the Torah tells us. But when the Torah talks about reward for someone that is doing good, so we are told that the reward could be for 2,000 generations. And as a result, the Talmud shares with us that we have been provided with a formula. This formula tells us that if there is 1 kilo of guilt for something you did wrong, there should be 500 kilos of a good feeling for what you do right. And therefore, if you did daven today, or if you studied Torah today, or if you kept kosher today, or if you made a bracha today, anything you did, there should be this awesome feeling, I am doing something incredibly good. If this message is communicated, and if we're mindful of it, we develop this moisture, this healthy lubricant within ourselves, that when something negative occurs, Lashon Hara, I don't have a need to share it with someone else. I don't have to put that other person down, because if I feel good about myself, no need at all to put someone else down. That is how we avoid it. And therefore, the Vayakhel of Shabbat is number one. Shabbat will take care of the problem of negativity towards Judaism. But there's more information in this week's Parsha that will guide the people of Israel, how to construct a Jewish hub, how to construct a Jewish home. And I think that will be appreciated by looking at the names of the CEOs of the operation known as constructing the Mishkan, the people who were in charge, the people who were there to actually build it. If we go ahead and look at their names, you will realize that there's something quite important that we can learn from it. So let's go through it. Who exactly took charge of the operation of the construction of the tabernacle, the Mishkan? So one name we are very familiar with from the tribe of Yehuda. This is the tribe of leadership, the tribe that eventually is going to produce the house of David, a tribe that our ancestors were already accustomed at that time that it's someone we turn to. And his name is Betzalel ben Uri ben Hur lemate Yehuda. Betzalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur. The rabbis analyze the name. They analyze the name of Betzalel, and they note that this is a person that's on a very high spiritual level. This construction was not just a piece of art, which it was, and there's a school of art called Betzalel, but there was something spiritual there. You're building a home for the Creator. There's something very spiritual. And to achieve it, you have to be in the shadow of the Creator. You have to feel that the Creator is above you. You have to be in the tzel is shadow, of Kel, of the Almighty. And therefore, the rabbis share with us insight that the name Betzalel relates to this idea that he is in the shadow of God, a very spiritual person, one that's connected to the higher realm. And as a result, he was able to achieve this incredible operation by building a structure that turned into our spiritual home, which eventually turned into a Bet HaMikdash, where until this day, we have our little Mikdash with our shul, Betzalel. Now, even his father's name, Uri, relates to or, light. It is a man that achieved light from above. And the Hur, the rabbis related to the Ben Chorin, a man of freedom. What makes someone free? Well, a person that is completely connected to the spiritual realm is a free man. So the name of the first party involved obviously is a name that symbolizes someone that's on a very high spiritual level. Now, we are told that this Betzalel was given the ability to inspire others. Ulehorot, and to guide, Natan Belibo, God Almighty placed in the heart of Betzalel the ability to teach. Now, he achieved all of this not alone, but with the assistance of someone from the tribe of Dan, the Mate Dan. And if you do remember, Dan at that time was viewed as the lowest of all the tribes. It was not a respected tribe. And due to that reason, the Almighty chose the second in command in this incredible operation of the construction of the tabernacle to have an individual from that tribe to assist in the project. And his name was Oholiav, the son of Achisamach. Okay, now, before we focus a little bit on the name, I would like to talk a little bit about the idea of Lehorot Natam Belibo, that God Almighty inspired, gave Bitzalel the tools to inspire others to be a good teacher. And I think I've shared in the past, you know what makes a teacher a good teacher? When a teacher is not judgmental of the student. I mean, it is so true that when you ever interact with someone that is always, that's judging you, that you sense that they are looking down at you for whatever reason, the way you dress, your level of religious practice, the type of hat you do or you don't wear, the type of beard you do or you don't have. When you interact with such a person, they can never really inspire you, for the simple reason is that part of teaching is feeling a connection and a concern for the student. If a teacher walks into a classroom and doesn't care about the students, but just wants to teach the material and leave, he's not going to be a successful teacher. If he walks in with a love of a student and values the student, he values them as humans. And even if they ask all kind of questions and they could be perhaps, drag a cup a little bit, doesn't make a difference, because this is someone that they see as important, as valuable. They see or hear a human being that's not 15 or 16, but rather they see here someone that in 20 years is going to be 35 or 36. When there is value of the individual, that will be a person that could teach. He will have within his heart the tools that can inspire the next generation. And I think what we are told about Bitzalel, that since Bitzalel was able to work with someone from the tribe of Dan, that symbolized at that time, someone that was from the lower caste of the people of Israel, someone who was a descendant of the tribe that was not fully accepted, someone that was not completely on a very high spiritual level. When the teacher Bitzalel could relate and work with such a person, that makes him a very capable teacher. And then he has in his heart the ability lehorot, to teach. That's how I read this verse. Lehorot natam belibo, which we are told here, relates back to Bitzalel. Do you want to know why Bitzalel has the ability to teach? Because he could work with someone from the tribe of Dan. There's an important message there, but there's another important message with understanding what the name of this leader from the tribe of Dan means. When you have teachers that are on very high spiritual levels, that are detached from the world, sometimes they could not really impact all of us. In other words, just as you hear stories in the 50s and in the 60s, that people would go to Sunday school or to Cheder, and they would have this Rebbe who was a big Talmid Chacham, but he came from Europe and he was more involved in the study of Torah and he couldn't relate to the young generation. They weren't inspired by him. It doesn't take away from his greatness. It doesn't take away from his high spiritual level. But the reality is that sometimes you need to have the teacher, the educator, the one to inspire, that is with the people. Someone that could say, I may not be on the highest level, but you know what? We're part of Klal Yisrael. We are all in the same tent. We all go to shuls, and we could share a shul, even though we are perhaps different. Our shuls, our tents, could be like a father to us that brings us together. Our ohel could be like an av, like a father. This is what this fellow from the tribe of Dan, that's what his name symbolizes. That he's not Bitzalel. Bitzalel was the one, the Rosh Hashiva, the Rebbe, who obviously, if you needed guidance in the words of Torah and you wanted to know what a spiritual human being looks like, you would turn to him. But someone that could deal with the complexities that people face, the teenager who feels a tremendous amount of guilt because of thoughts that he has that he feels are inappropriate. He can't perhaps turn to Bitzalel, but he could turn to Oholiav. And Oholiav could say to him, you know what? Even if you've done something wrong, there's a tent that welcomes us all like a father. That's what I'm here for. And as we are constructing our Bet HaMikdash, and one day when we construct our shuls and communities, we need to have someone to inspire us to act like Oholiav, to tell everyone, you know what? You are all welcome into this tent. It doesn't make a difference. You may not be on the highest spiritual level. Don't worry about it, because your tent is like a father. And if you need assistance, if you've stumbled and you've made mistakes and you need a brother to assist you, you know what? Somech noflim. If you need someone to assist you because you've stumbled, you have a brother to rely on. And that is what is symbolized by the name Achi Samach, my brother, you could rely on me. I'm like you. I'm not from Yehuda. I'm from the tribe of Dan. I'm not perhaps one that's the most spiritual, most educated, but I understand that Klal Yisrael has value together because we are in one tent and we are here to support one another. That's what we need. And to construct a community where people feel that they're living a life of meaning, that what they do is important. We need to have a Bitzalel. We need those spiritual guides. We need people that have knowledge of Torah and spirituality to guide us. But we need as well the Oholiav ben Achisamach to support those who are perhaps stumbling, people that reach out, people that accept you as you are. And if you hear stories of successful organizations, successful Kiruv organizations, the ones who led it with acceptance of others, not being judgmental, accepting them as they are the ones that bring people in. And if you have such an attitude, you will avoid the fire of machloket. And you know why? If I'm going to be reading day in, day out books about the greatest rabbinic figures that at age 7 completed all of Talmud and studied Torah 18 hours a day, and I'm going to start comparing those magnificent individuals to my life, I might start feeling really rotten about myself because I don't learn 18 hours a day. I didn't finish Shas when I was 7. I'm not so great. And if my bookshelf is yelling at me that the only greatness is if you are such a person, so I'm going to feel not so great about myself. And if I don't feel great about myself and I have a negative self-spiritual image, I'm going to be what I call the dry person that will seek meaning, perhaps in a very negative way, by putting someone else down. And I could unfortunately play a role in the machloket of fire, which we are trying to avoid. Yes, we need a Vayakhel to bring people together, but we want a Vayakhel that gives meaning to people. Not a Vayakhel that leads to Korach, but a Vayakhel that leads to an understanding and appreciation of self. We cannot achieve it if our guides are all Bitzalels, Ben Uri, Ben Hur. It's not going to be a successful operation. Do you know when we succeed? When we have the Oholiavs, the people who are welcoming, organizations, shuls, right, communities, schools, and in general, an attitude that you meet someone that looks a little bit different, that acts a little bit different, that has a different philosophy. Accept them. You accept them, and especially if you're dealing with youth, that's how you relate to them. That's how you bring them into the tent. And that's how we avoid the dryness that people feel, what is religion providing me? It's something that very agitating. I remember meeting a few years ago a young lady, and I was asked to meet her because there was some kind of issues that she had, and her parents were unhappy with her, religious choices. And the young lady says to me, my mother, with all due respect, is telling me that, I should be part of what religious people do. But I know that every single Shabbos before going to shul, she would take gravel, meaning her stomach would be churning from going to shul. Why was it churning? It was a meaningless and perhaps even a stressful gathering where you go there and you're going to be assessed what you're wearing and how fancy it is, or from a religious perspective, whatever it was. Shul can become a place where there's agitation. And if there's agitation, there's dryness. And if there's dryness, we can have the fire that could cause destruction. If, on the other hand, the attitude we have and the environment we create is an environment of welcoming people. Welcome to the tent. We have a big tent. We welcome everyone. And there are many shuls throughout the world, right? And historically, B'nai Torah was not such a place years ago, right? We all know that there was a very diverse crowd here, and it worked out well overall, right? We all have the stories. I've heard some stories. We have some historians as well. But overall, you were able to function, that someone with a kippah sruga could stand next to someone with a shrimo, could stand next to someone with a black hat and pray to one creator. And the three parties are not judging one another, but rather respecting. And perhaps if there's a very good environment, they're even making a contribution to one another, because perhaps one can talk about the value of the land of Israel and inspire the others. And the other one can inspire about some kind of details in halachic, and one in spirituality. You could create an environment when it's welcoming, when ohali is av, when I see my brother and he is there to support me. That's a success story. And that's what this parsha is about. We need a Vayakhel to avoid the negativity of boshesh, of viewing Judaism as a burden. How do we achieve it? We need a healthy Shabbat. How do we achieve a healthy Shabbat? We need to welcome people, because when you welcome them where you are holding, and when I don't get burdened by the fact that I'm only reading about righteous people that learn so much, but rather I interact with people that say, what you're doing is good. Even though you only learn an hour or two a day, you're doing other good things as well. And the fact is that you interact with people in a decent way. If I get the support from Oholiav and not the feeling of being inadequate from reading about B'Tzalel, that's how I feel good about myself. And when I feel good about myself, mission accomplished. I won't have to worry about spreading the machloket, because when I hear something negative, I'll say to myself, you know what? I'm not going to share it. It's not good for the people of Israel. There's no need. I'm going to go ahead and focus on myself, because what I am doing is valuable. I'm not B'Tzalel. I'm not learning 18 hours a day. I'm not able to construct a tabernacle, right? But I could do good because Oholiav told me. Oholiav is the one that tells me you have value, and therefore you are welcome in the tent. That is what this parsha teaches us. So it's a fundamental parsha for the Jewish journey, the healthy Jewish journey. And hopefully we learned a little bit about what Kohelet is and what Boshesh is and what Machloket is about. But more than anything else, the idea of the welcoming aspect of the Oholiav that we should have, in like the words of in Tehillim, Deshenim ve'ra'ananim yihiyu, that we should go ahead and serve God with this freshness. That will be a success story. I would like again to thank our sponsors. Thank you to Shirley Zuck and family. May the neshama, Shirley's mother, Rachel Zobrin, Rachel, Golda, Bat Avram Chaim have an aliyah. I thank everyone for joining, and it should be a very, very meaningful